My function today would be to give you a quick overview of the partnership and a quick introduction on how the first three guidelines that are discussed today were developed. The partnership started about nearly 2 years ago now. Yes, now we have them. On the recognition of four major considerations. First, that the wide range of goods and services provided by the livestock sector, edible, non-edible products, environmental services, etc., and the projected growth of the sector, both in industrialized world, but also in developing countries associated with the fight against hunger. The second is the large interface between livestock production and the environment through the large natural resource base that the sector uses, if you think about water, land, etc. Third is the extent of livestock supply chains, which go much beyond the farm gates. So when we think livestock production, we can't only think animals, we have to think the entire chain from feed production to processing. And that really calls for life cycle thinking in trying to assess and improve environmental interactions. And the fourth element is the multiple stakeholders that are today involved in livestock sector. So it's not only about producers or governments, but NGOs have to come in there, academia comes in there, private sector organization, retail, etc. They all have a say in the livestock sector development, and they all have an important role in making it more sustainable. The rationale that brought these many stakeholders to act together was kind of threefold. First is the lack of balanced, detailed and comprehensive data on environmental performance. And this is leading to confusion, false claims, and basically distracts the sector from really focusing on improvement and still keeps us on the battleground of whether we have impacts and the magnitude of these impacts. The second is the need for data and methods. It's related to the first point, but this need is both external kind of and internal. External because environmental performance declaration is on the horizon, and actually some countries, some retail, some restaurants, chains also are asking the sector to declare performance. So there is a demand on the sector, and it's also internal because the sector clearly realizes the opportunity there is to improve environmental sustainability and need instruments to manage, to measure the effect of changes in production decisions. The third area is that the livestock sector is quite particular. It is characterized by an important multifunctionality. There is a crop-livestock integration. It's related to land use. So there are very specific questions that the livestock sector needs to address in order to then also engage with other sectors which are also progressing on the side of environmental performance declaration. So we basically have to prepare ourselves, if you want, to then be able also to have a discussion with the other sectors which are moving ahead, and if we're not there, they are basically setting the rules for the livestock sector. So what is specific to LIP? It is addressing livestock supply chains exclusively. It is focused on metrics and methods, so it's really on how you measure things and progress. It addresses a range of environmental issues. We start with a strong focus on greenhouse gas emissions, but we want to include other emission or other impact categories. It is international and multi-stakeholder. And we have basically three clusters of stakeholders present: private sector organizations, governments, and civil society. It focuses on continuous improvement. Sustainability as a journey rather than sustainability as a state, a steady state that you may reach at one stage. The key principle is evidence-based dialogue for sustainability improvement, and that really summarizes all the slides that we have so far. So it's really clearly recognized that common metrics need to be both science-based and agreed or negotiated, if you want, among the involved stakeholders. So those two elements are important and are recognized really in the way LEAP is designed and LEAP is operating. And this principle is shared with a higher level partnership, if you want, which is called the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, which provides kind of the umbrella under which LEAP is nested, and which addresses more questions about practice change, where LEAP really focuses on methods and metrics. This is on only one slide on how LEAP works. You have three core entities. The steering committee, where we have an equal say between the three clusters of stakeholders I just introduced before. It's very important, this equal say at that level. We have the secretariat hosted at FAO, where basically the work plans are managed and the finances are managed. And we have an important element also, which are the technical advisory groups. You will hear from them in the next presentations. And that's really where a lot of the developments are made. And that's really our first instrument also to ensure these two elements, a scientific basis and negotiation, discussion, consultation. Here is a slide showing the participants to date. I'm not going to list them. I just want to highlight that this is not a closed list. We still welcome, and in fact we still receive new participants. And I think my colleague Camilo will give you more information. The three guidelines that we're going to discuss today, you have them here. Beverly mentioned them already. I just want to say that the decision to start with these three guidelines was a decision of the steering committee. Right, because you could think about other pork, for example, large ruminants, which are not there in this first batch, but that prioritization is really one of the tasks of the steering committee. The purpose is to harmonize or to bring harmonization in measuring and monitoring the environmental performance of livestock supply chain. So it's really, it needs to go in some details in order to be able to align practices to make sure that these measuring and monitoring is done in a consistent way. They were released as draft for public review on the 6th of March of this year. And they target a wide array of stakeholders in the livestock sector. Producers, supply chain partners, policymakers. But one thing worth mentioning is that they target LCA practitioners. So do not expect to find basic LCA guidance, basic LCA training in these guidelines. The impacts that are included, as I mentioned before, we still have a strong focus on greenhouse gas emissions. So in dark green here, you see climate change and fossil energy demand. Those are two midpoint impacts that are included in the three guidelines. Nevertheless, in the case of the feed guidelines, we were able to go already beyond that and deal with the light green boxes, acidification, eutrophication, and land occupation. So that's already a step in that direction, and in the future, it is the intention to cover as many as possible of these midpoints. The structure is pretty straightforward. You have a kind of a background and information on how the guidelines were developed and how, to whom they are intended. Some still basic principle about LCA and how you handle LCA. And then you come into the part B, which is kind of the core of the guidance. And that's where the presenters, Stuart and Tøyen will focus their presentation on this part B. And then some appendices. It was decided to split the chain into two, basically cover first the feed, so it's up to the animal's mouth, and then to cover the animals and post-farm processing, if you wish. This is done for practical reasons, because we had a little bit to organize the work, but of course that forces us then to reconstitute the chain, or the user to reconstitute the chain, so the user needs, if he wants or she wants to analyze the whole chain, to really use the feed guidelines in combination with either the poultry or the small ruminant guidelines, right? So we try to make that easy by harmonizing the vocabulary and so on, but it forces to use the two documents. The process of development, that's an important part. So on the 6th of March, we really open the public review of these guidelines. But it's important to really highlight that Before that, we conducted a really strong effort in already consulting a broad group of stakeholders, reviewing the literature out there, so really building on the existing approaches and standards in the whole development phase. So it's not that that was prepared by a small group and now is only open for public review. We really strive to have this broad engagement right from the start, and the tags were very instrumental to do that. All along, we try to balance between prescription and consensus, and that's quite important too. If we want to influence the way assessments and monitoring is done, then we need to be prescriptive. We need to be quite clear and make a clear recommendation on how things should be done. So there is indeed, in the end, some alignment in the practices. But the more you go into that direction, the less consensus, obviously, you find. So, and maybe also you exclude some practitioners because they don't have access to certain information they would need to follow the prescription you've put in the guidelines. So we always try to balance the two. So we are really making a difference in terms of the way assessments are done, but we don't close the door. That was important. And the fourth point here is that we really understood that this is a first draft, right? And even after the public review, it will be still a draft probably. And those are documents that will have to evolve over time as new methods are made available, as new data is made available, as we have practical experience coming back, and we see things that need to be changed. So during the process development, we really, as I said, try to engage broadly, face-to-face, and the tags, you will see how broad they were, and had face-to-face meeting. We also organized workshop in China, in Kenya, to go closer to certain systems of production because we wanted them to be better reflected in the guide. After that development within the tag, we went through a first review, and that review engaged the steering committee, because basically the draft that you see are being cleared by the steering committee and thereby by the members of those represented at the steering committee. And we also called on external reviewers from Carbon Trust, WRI, and SIK for an additional technical review of the guidelines. Some key challenges we found, and I'm sure we'll find more time to discuss that during the rest of the webinar, ensuring international input from diverse farming and supply systems. These are not guidelines that are only targeting industrialized countries. The scope is to address all systems in the world, so we needed input from that, and it was not always easy for us to access it and to make sure it was reflected in the guidelines. There are still contentious or still disputed area around allocation, for example, and you will see there that in the guidelines we're not always prescriptive because we have to reflect these ongoing discussions. And as I mentioned before, we try to cover more impact categories, but there are categories for which science is still in development, so we could not yet include them in these guidelines that, again, need to be science-based and negotiated, so agreed upon. And my last slide on opportunities and linkages. First, it's quite amazing. The tags work mostly on voluntary contribution from sector organizations, from countries and others, and really it was a great engagement and I think a great level of delivery. So really the sector stands behind this initiative and see, I guess, the need for these guidelines. It's important also that we manage to place LEAP in a complementary way with regard to other initiatives. There are many initiatives out there on sustainability of agriculture, sustainability of food systems, but really this placement of LEAP on metrics and methods and on livestock, I think made us quite complementary to others and help the work of the partnership. And I think recently also the involvement of the guidelines in the test phase or in some pilots of the test phase of the EC product environmental footprint is quite interesting and will really help us in road testing these guidelines and in making them relevant, at least also in the EC